Education and data go hand in hand. But what information should we be tracking? And more importantly, how do we organize all that data so that we can use it to guide our instruction and inform parent administration? In today's video, I am giving you a peek inside my teacher's notebook so that you can see how I organize all the data. Don't worry, there's no actual student data. It is just the pages that I use to help me track academic behavior and all the other kinds of data that we keep as teachers. If you're new here, I'm Rachel Vincent, and I share tips on running an effective and efficient classroom so you can get more things done and still have time to teach. So if you've been around for a while, you know that I don't really use notebooks. I find it's much easier to organize all the paper things we as teachers have to keep track of in drawers. However, I have two binder notebooks that I use. One is my substitute notebook that I put out and keep information in for when I have a sub, and the other one is my teacher notebook. So the reason I use a notebook and not like files or drawers for all of this data is because typically when I need to find a page or information for a student, I am looking for something specific and not a group of things. And so it is much easier to go into a notebook to find the specific thing I'm looking for than it is to flip through files of paper or stacks of paper. So now let's go inside my notebook. Inside my teacher notebook, I have multiple tabs to keep things organized. So in my first section, I actually have student login information for their Chromebooks and different websites that we use. Obviously won't be showing you any of that, but I did want to show you some of the things that I actually keep track of, and it actually goes on my on my wall in my teacher area just for easy access. So student information that I need to access quickly in a class roster, along with the number, because sometimes knowing your students' numbers takes a minute to learn. And then I also have a transportation form that I keep on my wall, so if they ask, the office might ask what bus somebody rides, that way I know the number and who picks what kids up, that kind of information. And then I do have checklists, but that I actually keep on a notebook when I'm grading. If you want to check out my weekly plans and how I keep track of grades and things like that, I use a checklist like this more for like keeping track of who's turned in a permission slip or ordered pictures or different things. So I just pre-type all my students' names and mark it off in that section. The next section is my parent contact section, and this is where I keep information on how to contact parents. And so I have this form in my data pack that I use if I need it, but I am currently at a school that also requires parents to fill out a form that has all of the same information. And so I feel like parents at the beginning of the year have so much to fill out that I don't want to make them fill out two separate forms with the same exact information. So I actually will photocopy the form that they fill out for our school office, and I use that instead of this one. Then I also keep track of parent-teacher conferences, just so that we have the data of what we've met, what we've talked about. I'll send a copy of this home with the parents and keep a copy for myself. And then this next page is very important for tracking and parent communication, and I typically only track on this page phone calls or talking with a parent in person. I do have on the bottom some communication codes that I can use, but typically I don't really track email or text because I save all parent emails in a folder in my email, and then I screenshot and have a folder where I save any text messages from Class Dojo because I don't give out my phone number. So the next section of my notebook is where I keep track of our reading data, and we use Fontes and Pinnell, so that's where I keep a lot of this information. But one of the things I do is keep track of who is in what group and what we're typically working on and maybe what text we're using. In fourth grade, we often use chapter books, so our text lasts several weeks. I will also keep in any guided reading lessons. Because we're using chapter books, my guided reading lesson plans often last several weeks, and so I will keep them in here just so I can often reference them because I take this whole notebook if we go to an IEP meeting or a parent conference or an academic team meeting. so that I just have the information of what I am teaching students in small groups. And then because we are Fountas and Pinnell, I have a lot of the Fountas and Pinnell resources. So when we're doing benchmarking, I know what level they're at, and then some of the progressing for progress monitoring, and then some of the word sorts to find out what level to begin a student who's new to our district at. The next section is actually for my student learning objective, which is we no longer do paper versions. It's all online, so nothing is in this section for me. So I probably need to not have this section in there anymore. It's real life of my notebook. And then the next section is IEP information. I do keep track of any RTI interventions that I'm giving for a student who actually does not have an IEP, just because that's typically where that data needs to be kept, at least for my IEP students. And then behind this, I will keep any accommodation list from IEPs or 504s that I have. The next section is my medical information. We get sort of a printout from our nurse of diagnosis and medicines or inhalers or anything that they have in the nurse's clinic. All that information goes in here. The next section, we are a Leader in Me school, so a lot of this is just the different professional developments that we went to and things like that, just so when I need to reach for it, I have it at my fingertips when planning for our Leader in Me. And then this is for any guidelines from my district that I have, such as our grade weights and requirements, and how to use different platforms that our district use and things like that. And then the last section I have is for student data. And so this is often where I will keep track of things we're tracking, like our fact fluency. And then I have teacher observations, different things that I'm noticing about students. I will have it just one student, and then this whole form is for that student. It really depends on what I'm tracking. Typically I do this if this is a struggling student where there's several things that they need, to work on. I'll do a tracking sheet like this, but I also have forms. Oh, I keep my guided math plans in here too. I don't really have a guided math section, but I do have this. My guided math tends to be more of skills based than anything else when it comes to small group instruction. So this sheet I use for tracking several students in one area. So the first sheet I showed you is one student who is struggling in several areas. This I will typically use on like a unit test. So for instance, if we take our place value test and I notice that several students struggled with rounding, I will track that information here so I know to go back in my guided math lessons and cover rounding again. Or if several students need help in with adding and subtracting larger numbers, I can add that information here so it's all the same skill with the students. And then I'll date it and keep space to revisit, let them know if they've got it, if they still need more practice, just to references as I'm planning guided math. I typically use this more in math than I do with reading or any other subject, but I could use it for anyone. I just typically tend to use it for math. And then this is for tracking behavior for multiple students. So you list your students here, and then this is typically where I put in, if I'm using my clicker to count blurting out or count repetitiveness of behavior problems, I'll track it on this. And then this is a sheet that students will fill out if they're struggling with following rules and directions. And then I use this, like just recently I had a parent who wanted me to send home daily information about their behavior so that she can help reinforce that at home and do some sort of incentives at home. So we do one of these now. So I just fill out what happened each day so that the parent has that information. I also have this form. I haven't had to use this yet this year, but sometimes students will start to ask to go to the bathroom more often or go to the nurse or get water.
and it just becomes frequent use. And so I just use this to track that, to sort of see if it's a health issue or if it's an avoidance of work issue, to kind of see what's going on. So the rest of my notebook has a bunch of random things in there. I have like my printout of things that I have checked out of our school library. I have Fountas and Pinnell levels from 3rd grade, which I probably should move into the Fountas and Pinnell section. Some of these are just empty. I have my mentor things because I have a mentee this year. And so just a bunch of random things. I think this is from open house. Like, it's sometimes just becomes a collection of a bunch of different things. And so this is what I typically use. Now, if I have a student or several students that I am trying to keep lots of data for, multiple students, I sometimes will use these tabs that have the numbers on them so that each student can have a whole section. I haven't done this in several years, but it is another way of organizing student data if you don't want to have it in sections. I find the sections work better for me, but again, if you have, this worked really well when I worked at a school that had a lot of interventions and a lot of data tracking that we had to do, where each student had their own tab. So that is an option as well.
I'm curious to know, what do you keep your data in? Do you use a notebook, or do you use files or something else? Let me know in the comments below how you keep track of your student information. I have all of my tracking forms, the academic, classroom, behavior data form, all bundled together in my Teachers Pay Teachers store. You can find that link below. And click on the video that's on your screen now if you're curious how to stay organized with all the other teacher paperwork.